In 1933, the most famous scientist on Earth was hiding in a wooden holiday hut in the English countryside, guarded by locals armed with shotguns. There was a $5,000 bounty on his head. The regime that had just taken power in Germany had published his photograph with a chilling caption, "Not yet hanged." He wasn't a spy, a general, or a politician. He was a theoretical physicist, and the ideas locked inside his head had already rewritten the rules of reality. To understand how Albert Einstein broke physics, we have to go back to 1884, to a bedroom in Munich, Germany. A 5-year-old lies sick in bed. To cheer him up, his father hands him a simple magnetic compass. For most kids, it's just a toy, but for young Albert, it was a profound revelation. No matter how he turned the case, the needle invariably swung north, guided by an invisible force. He later said this moment convinced him that there had to be something deeply hidden behind the scenes of our reality. It sparked a lifelong obsession with invisible forces. But early on, nobody thought Albert was a genius. His parents actually worried he might be developmentally delayed because he didn't speak a word until he was 3 or 4 years old. Family legend says he finally broke his silence at the dinner table, announcing, "The soup is too hot." When his shocked parents asked why he hadn't spoken before, he supposedly replied, "Because up to now, everything was in order." That quiet defiance defined his youth. He hated the rigid militaristic style of Prussian education. When his father's electrotechnical business failed and the family moved to Italy, 15-year-old Albert was left behind in a Munich boarding house to finish school. He was utterly miserable. So he dropped out, renounced his German citizenship to avoid military service, and fled across the Alps to join his family. He was a stateless high school dropout. When he tried to test into the Swiss Federal Polytechnic School in Zurich, he failed the entrance exam. He aced the math and physics sections, but bombed French, botany, and zoology. Eventually, he finished high school, passed the exam, and graduated from the Polytechnic in 1900. But his rebellious streak had alienated his professors. None of them would hire him. For 2 years, the man who would reimagine the cosmos couldn't even land a job teaching high school math. Finally, a friend's father pulled some strings and got him a desk job as a third-class technical expert at the Swiss Patent Office in Bern. A lot of people think the patent office was a dead end, but Einstein called it that worldly cloister where I hatched my most beautiful ideas. His day job involved examining patents for electromechanical devices. This work actually trained his mind to strip away unnecessary details and visualize abstract physical concepts as concrete mechanical realities. He would finish his daily patent work in a few hours and then secretly hide his physics notes in his desk drawer when his supervisor walked by. And from that desk drawer, in a single year, 1905, a 26-year-old Einstein published 4 papers that completely altered the trajectory of human history. Physicists call it his annus mirabilis, or miraculous year. First, he solved a mystery about light called the photoelectric effect. He proposed that light isn't just a wave, it's made of discrete, individual packets of energy called photons. This paper laid the groundwork for quantum mechanics. If you have solar panels on your roof or a digital camera in your phone, you are directly using the physics Einstein figured out in this paper. A few weeks later, he published a paper on Brownian motion. He provided the mathematical framework proving that the random jittering of microscopic particles in water is caused by invisible water molecules crashing into them. At the time, scientists were still fiercely debating whether atoms actually existed. Einstein's math proved they were physically real. Then came June. He published his theory of special relativity. He realized that the speed of light is a hard, universal limit, but if the speed of light never changes, something else has to give. That something is time. He showed that time is not an absolute ticking clock in the background of the universe. The faster you move, the slower time passes for you relative to someone standing still. And finally, in November, he tied a bow on the year with a tiny equation, E equals mc squared. Mass and energy are just two forms of the exact same thing. Because the speed of light squared is such a massive number, it meant a tiny paperclip's worth of mass contains the energy equivalent of thousands of tons of TNT. He did all of this while working a full-time office job. But Einstein wasn't satisfied. Special relativity only worked for things moving at constant speeds. It didn't account for acceleration, and it completely ignored gravity. In 1907, still sitting at the patent office, he had what he later called the happiest thought of his life. He realized that if you were falling freely in an elevator whose cable had snapped, you wouldn't feel your own weight. You would float. Gravity and acceleration are basically the same thing. Turning that thought into rigorous mathematics took 8 grueling years. He enlisted his old college friend Marcel Grossman to teach him the complex tensor calculus required. In November 1915, he unveiled general relativity. He proposed that gravity isn't a mysterious magnetic-like force pulling objects together the way Isaac Newton thought. Instead, mass and energy physically curve the fabric of space-time.
Think of a bowling ball sitting on a trampoline. It creates a dip. If you roll a marble nearby, it orbits the bowling ball. The ball isn't pulling the marble is simply following the curved surface of the trampoline. That is how gravity works. This sounded like absolute science fiction, but general relativity made a highly specific prediction. The immense gravity of the sun should visibly bend the light of distant stars passing behind it. During a total solar eclipse in May 1919, British astronomer Arthur Eddington traveled to an island off the coast of West Africa to test this. The photographs confirmed it. Starlight was deflected by the exact amount Einstein's math demanded. When the results were announced, the global press went wild. Headlines read, "Revolution in Science, Newtonian Ideas Overthrown." Overnight, this quirky 40-year-old theoretical physicist became the most famous intellectual in the world. And this isn't just abstract theory. Every time you use GPS on your phone, you rely on Einstein, because the GPS satellites in orbit are moving incredibly fast. Special relativity dictates their onboard clocks tick slower than ours by about 7 microseconds a day. But because they are further away from Earth's mass, experiencing weaker gravity, general relativity dictates their clocks tick faster by 45 microseconds a day. The net result is that satellite clocks run 38 microseconds fast every day. If engineers didn't program Einstein's equations into the satellites to correct this, your GPS would be off by miles within minutes. But brilliant equations rarely translate to an easy personal life. While studying in Zurich, Einstein met and fell in love with Mileva Maric, a brilliant Serbian physics student. They had a daughter named Liesl before they were married. What happened to Liesl remains one of history's great mysteries. She was either given up for adoption or died of scarlet fever in infancy. Albert and Mileva married in 1903 and had 2 sons, Hans Albert and Eduard. But as Einstein's fame grew, his marriage crumbled. He began an affair with his cousin, Elsa, whom he would eventually marry. The separation with Mileva was brutal. Einstein even drafted a chilling authoritarian contract dictating that she must clean his clothes, bring him 3 meals a day in his room, and expect no affection in return. When they finally divorced in 1919, they agreed to a remarkable settlement. Einstein was so confident he would eventually win the Nobel Prize in physics, he promised the entire future cash award to Mileva. 3 years later, when he was awarded the 1921 Nobel Prize in Physics, she received the funds, more than 10 times a professor's annual salary.
But his greatest personal tragedy was his younger son, Edward. A brilliant student who idolized Sigmund Freud and wanted to be a psychiatrist, Edward suffered a severe mental breakdown in his early 20s. He was diagnosed with schizophrenia and spent much of his life institutionalized, subjected to brutal early psychiatric treatments. Einstein was heartbroken. His second wife, Elsa, remarked that this sorrow was eating up Albert. By the 1920s, the physics community was diving headfirst into quantum mechanics, the study of the subatomic world. And quantum mechanics suggested that at the smallest level, the universe is fundamentally random and probabilistic. Einstein hated this. He argued fiercely with his friend and rival, Danish physicist Niels Bohr. Einstein famously declared his absolute conviction that the universe wasn't governed by a roll of the dice. He believed there had to be hidden, deterministic rules we just hadn't found yet. To prove quantum mechanics was flawed, Einstein published a paper pointing out a ridiculous implication. For the theory to work, two particles could become entangled, meaning interacting with one would instantly affect the other even if they were light years apart. He mocked this as spooky action at a distance. Ironically, decades later, experiments proved that spooky action is completely real. Einstein's attempt to break quantum mechanics actually highlighted one of its most profound features, a feature that now forms the basis of modern quantum computing. While Einstein debated physics, the world was darkening. In 1933, Adolf Hitler came to power. Einstein, visiting the United States at the time, realized he could never return to his homeland. His books were burned. His cottage was raided. He formally renounced his German citizenship and briefly hid out in that guarded English hut before accepting a permanent position at the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey. 6 years later, as war loomed, fellow physicist Leo Szilard visited Einstein's vacation cabin. Szilard knew German scientists had discovered nuclear fission. He drafted a letter to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, warning that an atomic bomb was possible, and he needed Einstein's legendary signature to make sure the president actually read it. The letter worked. It sparked the creation of the Manhattan Project. Einstein himself was a committed pacifist. He had no security clearance and zero involvement in building the bomb, later expressing deep regret over signing the letter, stating he wouldn't have lifted a finger if he knew Germany would ultimately fail to build their own. In his later years at Princeton, Einstein became an American icon. He let his hair grow wild and famously refused to wear socks because he found them bothersome.
But he was far from a quiet academic. Long before the civil rights movement gained mainstream traction, Einstein was fiercely outspoken against racism. In 1946, he delivered a commencement address at Lincoln University, a historically black institution, explicitly calling out racial segregation as a disease of white people. His activism, combined with his left-leaning political views, made the FBI so paranoid that J. Edgar Hoover amassed a 1,400-page surveillance file on him, digging through his trash and tapping his phone. Scientifically, his final 3 decades were spent in intense isolation. While the rest of the physics world cracked the secrets of particle physics, Einstein worked relentlessly on a unified field theory. He wanted one elegant master equation that combined gravity and electromagnetism. He pursued it with mathematical blinders on, ignoring the newly discovered strong and weak nuclear forces. Even on his deathbed in Princeton Hospital, after suffering a ruptured abdominal aneurysm in April 1955, he was scribbling field equations. He refused life-saving surgery, calmly stating, "It is tasteless to prolong life artificially. I have done my share. It is time to go." He died at age 76. But his story has one final, incredibly bizarre twist. During the autopsy, the pathologist on duty, Thomas Harvey, simply removed Einstein's brain without permission. He took it home, chopped it into 240 blocks, and kept it in jars in a cider box for decades, occasionally sending small slivers to researchers trying to figure out the anatomical secret to genius. Albert Einstein wasn't just a brain in a jar, and he wasn't a solitary wizard pulling equations out of thin air. He was a deeply flawed, endlessly curious human being who looked at the everyday universe, clocks, trains, and falling elevators, and realized we were fundamentally misunderstanding reality. I want to know what you think. If Einstein were alive today, looking at the limits of our current technology, what modern mystery do you think he would become obsessed with solving? Dark energy? Quantum gravity? Let me know down in the comments. I'm working on several more deep dives into the minds that built our modern world. If you found this fascinating, please hit that subscribe button and leave a like so the algorithm doesn't curve this video into a digital black hole. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.